And even just the conversations that people are having as well, like especially around this area, even over the eastern suburbs, two young males took their life in a consecutive 2 days. So, and there's so many people that have been through probably what they're going through and then came out the other side and they may have just lost hope. And the more conversations and the more podcasts, the more people that come out and openly speak about their past struggles and I guess how they got out of it will ultimately save lives in the long run because it gives people hope as well. My story might give one person hope and that's a job well done. I'm glad it all happened for that reason.
Welcome to the To Be Human podcast, Troy Jones.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. So let's start with a quote from your website, Crossing for a Cause. I started to push myself physically and mentally in my sessions. And as I did, I found myself starting to deal with the demons inside. I started to open up. I started to learn about mental health. And the best part of all, I started to speak to others. So I would love to learn more about your earlier days, Troy, and what having demons inside means to you.
Yeah, so I guess it delves back about 8 years ago. I lost a good friend of mine. She fell off the ridges not too far from here. And obviously being a young male, I didn't really know how to deal or process my emotions. And I just sort of internalized that obviously the first person you, I guess, love in a way, you've lost them and there's no rule book on how you deal with, I guess, the trauma from that. So I just internalized that and just turned to drugs and alcohol as an escape for a long time. And obviously that was really detrimental to being happy. Obviously it was hard enough to deal with at the time, but that just made it 10 times worse. So I guess the demons are all the bad thoughts that you think you don't want to be here, or is this ever going to end? Am I going to feel like this for years to come? You don't really have that foresight or that hope, I guess, when you're sort of in that mindset, which is really hard to get out of. So I guess I just want to show people that you can be in your darkest place, your rock bottom, and then you can get out of it and you can have hope as well because it will get better just over time. So I guess, yeah, those were my demons and exercise saved me. Just lifting weights at the start was like a release for me. It was sort of, I guess, drugs and alcohol. I was still partying a little bit, but then started running. We can get into that as well, where I got dragged into doing an 11K fun run and got halfway and it almost killed me. It was 6Ks. So 6Ks in and then made the finish line. It was just sort of like this euphoric feeling. And guess I've been chasing that feeling ever since. And yeah, running sort of started out as a punishment. I was like, I hated running so much that if I could run every day, then everything in life would become a lot easier. And then it sort of turned into a therapy for me where I have some of my best ideas when I run. So yeah, those were the demons and I guess what caused them. It's rock bottom, no matter how you get there. So I guess if you are suffering from some sort of mental illness or you are upset, sad, got anxiety, that just know that have hope and it will get better eventually.
And is that something that you'd experienced before losing a friend, or is that sort of something that started to develop afterwards?
Yeah, started to develop afterwards. Like the drugs and alcohol, I'd still go out and party and stuff, but nothing like I was. It was sometimes Thursday or Sunday, every day, consistently for a long time. I was sort of in between jobs at the time as well, so my life was sort of just all over the place, and I was just making dumb decisions that ultimately could have taken my life as well.
And what do you think? What were you chasing in turning to drugs and alcohol? Like, what did you feel like at that point in time they provided you that like not normal everyday life didn't?
I guess it was just an escape. I could open up a lot more to people as well. And it just took me out of the reality I was living for sometimes 2-3 days. But then after that finished, it was 10 times worse going back to work on a Monday or not working at all. And you're not having that routine and schedule and just feeling like I was lost, just floating through life miserable.
Yeah, so it sort of gave you that like element of human connection that you're possibly missing outside of that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sort of, I guess, yeah, I just didn't want to feel how I felt at that time, and anything that made me feel a little bit remotely happier or took me out of that sort of mindset that I was going to give it a go. And obviously there's other things you can do that are so much more beneficial to get out of that thing. And that was probably the most detrimental to anyone. Like if you are suffering, I'm not going to sit here and say, don't do drugs, they're bad. But if you're depressed or you've got anxiety or your life's not going the way it should be, then that's only going to magnify those problems 1,000 times.
Yeah, I think it's so important to not identify like any shame in turning to like drugs and alcohol, particularly when you're going through a rough time, because I feel like if you sort of speak to anyone that has been in that position, and I've certainly been in that position years ago when I was very unhappy in my life, it was an outlet for the unhappiness that I was experiencing. And I can definitely relate to you when you talk about, it was an opportunity to open up. In my experience, it was, everyone just like at the time, it just seemed like a really amazing option to be able to like talk about the deeper things and connect with people on a deeper level. And I think that if I had more of that in my everyday life, that was outside of that sort of partying aspect, I don't think I would have partied as much.
Yeah, me too. And also, it's very hard to, I guess, reach out and open up to friends and family or your close inner circle. And that was sort of like a way to, I guess, drop the barriers and speak openly about these things. And I don't regret one bit of it. It's sort of, I've done a lot of dumb things in my life, but I'm speaking to you right now and obviously trying to change the stigma around mental health and trying to get people to realize they can push themselves physically, mentally, and take that extra little step and try and level up and become the best person they can be. So it was all a learning curve, and I've learned a lot of lessons from it as well. And it's got me to where I am now. So I'm sort of thankful that all that did happen and all those bad things, you sort of learn from those and then know not what to do next time, and you're better equipped to deal with anything that comes your way next time it happens.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have that aspect of courage, I think, to be able to sort of be open with people. And I think, when we encourage people to be open about what they're going through, I think another important aspect of that is to open up to the right people. And obviously someone like yourself has sort of turned into a type of mentor for people going through these things.
Yeah, definitely. And even like just letting everyone know my past, like no one has anything to hold over me and it's freeing. You sort of been like, I've done this and I've done that, been arrested, all that kind of stuff, made stupid decisions, learn from my mistakes as well. And people will open up. Like I'm a personal trainer and you don't realize how many people do suffer from some sort of mental illness. And then once you tell your story, they're like, shit, well, if he's been through it, then I can open up about mine. And you break down those barriers pretty much in the first 10, 15 minutes if you sort of know something's going on. And it might take a little bit longer for them to open up, but then you've told them all your dirty secrets in a way, and they'll definitely open up to you. And then you go, well, this is what worked for me. It might not work for you, but the more people and the more lessons are out there, the more people that open up about these things, the more lives will ultimately be saved.
Yeah, I think there's like a bit of a subtle movement at the moment, because I base myself in Cronulla, and particularly around the Sutherland Shire at the moment, I've seen sort of this movement started, and it may have a lot to do with what you've been doing, but more and more people coming out, and particularly men coming out and saying, I've had some pretty big hardship in my life and I've turned to ways that maybe, were quite disempowering and hurtful for me, but now I'm sort of like making a stand and I'm at a turning point. And a lot of that's being seeded through long distance running.
Yeah, definitely. And even just the conversations that people are having as well, like especially around this area, even over the eastern suburbs, 2 young males took their life in a consecutive 2 days. So, and there's so many people that have been through probably what they're going through and then came out the other side and they might have just lost hope. And the more conversations and the more podcasts, the more people that come out and openly speak about their past struggles and I guess how they got out of it will ultimately save lives in the long run because it gives people hope as well. My story might give one person hope and that's a job well done. I'm glad it all happened for that reason.
Yeah, I certainly think that it's done that for more than one person. So I want to go back to the start when, you did this run in Sutherland, and from what I'm aware of, you're pretty confident, like you're a pretty fit guy. You thought you were kind of going to go out and smash it. What ended up happening in that experience?
Yeah, so I got actually dragged into it. So I always hated running. It was always like, no, I don't run. Like I'd lift weights and obviously do a bit of cardio on like the assault bike or something, but running's just completely different. Like you think you're fit and then you start running and it really humbles you real quick. So I think I did 2 practice runs before. It was like a 5 and a 6K. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to see how I go, just try and make it. And yeah, I made it halfway and my legs just gave out. It's probably the worst I've ever felt. And I finally crossed the finish line. It was sort of like that feeling. I guess drugs are sort of a bit different because when you get on drugs, like it feels good in that time. And then after, it's just torture the days and weeks after. But then like running's like torturous during your run, and then you finish and it's like that natural high and it's so much more beneficial. But yeah, mate, crossed the finish line, and then I thought to myself, I've got two decisions right now. I can either become the best runner I can be or just completely give up. And then it slowly spiraled into City to Surf, which is 14 Ks. Didn't get that same feeling, but it was still just as good at the achievement. And then did a half marathon. Then I was going to do it's called Racing the Planet. So it's like a 6-stage multi-leg marathon where you carry all your own stuff. It's 250 Ks broken over 6 days. And I thought that was the pinnacle of ultra running. I was like, if I can do that, then I've sort of proved to myself that that's the best, and that's the best I can become. And then one of my mates said, why don't you run from Perth to Sydney? And I thought about it and I was like, I think that's it. That's the one. So, and that's how it all came about.
It's just amazing. And I think before we go into that, because obviously that's the most important thing here, but in sort of your, like, in leading up to this big pivotal moment in your life, what was it that you were already getting through sort of starting to do more of that long distance running? Because obviously there was something inside of that, even maybe back to your first run, even though it was really tough, that sort of like gave you a trigger in your mind where you're like, okay, yeah, like I want to go this way now and stop the partying.
Yeah, it was sort of, I guess it was a different outlet. It was just totally different, totally surreal, and just it was a bit of the pain as well, just and knowing, like when I first started, I used it as a punishment. So I was like, if I can run, then everything in life will become easy that day. So if I was running at that time like 4 kilometers and I was like, this sucks, then everything in life or everything in that day would ultimately be easier because I've done the worst thing I could possibly think of. And yeah, it did turn into a therapy for me. And you process a lot of your past thoughts as well. Like when you're running, it's just, you can listen to music, but you're obviously thinking still, like you don't just totally switch off. And yeah, it's a good way to process, I guess, any thoughts you're having and just sort of, I guess, wear yourself out physically, but also mentally as well. Like after you're exhausted, you're like, oh, I feel content. And you're not so much thinking about all those little things in your head that you may be thinking about if you didn't exercise or run, for me.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. And I also had like a bit of a different experience as at the same time as well, because when I started long distance running about 2.5 years ago, and I went like full out, I guess similar to you at the start, definitely not where you're at now, but it was that like amazing mental outlet for me. And it really most of the time made me feel amazing. But there were certainly times where I think I pushed too much, and post run, like I would get like very like heavy anxiety and feel like really exhausted. And I kind of like realized through that there's definitely like limits, particularly when starting out in long distance running, where like your biological response is also involved in this. So if you're like kind of headstrong and you're like, I'm going to use this for punishment, this is going to make my day better, or whatever it is that you're thinking, that sometimes your body hasn't like kind of kept up with the mental fortitude that you have in your head. And that was like a big lesson for me, is most of the time it made me feel amazing, but there were times where I would finish and I'd just be like absolutely in the gutter, being like, okay, like, no, I need to reassess how deep I go in my outlets, because I got to look after my body as well.
Yeah, definitely. I had that as well. Not so much the mental, more the like the physiology of like your body breaking down. Is I used to go out and just think, I'm just going to run as far as I can and exhaust myself, and then I wouldn't run for like 4 or 5 days, and then I got every injury under the sun in the first like 6-12 months. And then my boss, who's helped me plan a lot of the run, he said, you need a running coach. He said, I know a lot about training, but I know nothing about running. And it was probably the best thing I ever did. Keep someone that keeps me accountable as well to someone else, not just myself, because obviously the run itself is a massive thing and it scared the shit out of me, and that sort of made me train. But also I had him to keep me accountable as well. So if I didn't run one day, which I'd like missed probably 5 runs in the 2 years, it gave me anxiety because I felt like I was letting him down, but also myself down.
Yeah, it's definitely learn a lot of lessons in this. So with deciding to run from Perth to Sydney, which is 3,931 kilometers, When looking through your website and speaking about this, particularly in looking at the stuff in the lead up before I knew that you'd obviously done this, there is such a strong sense of certainty that you have, and I am deeply impressed by. Where did that come from?
It sort of actually came from Tony Robbins. I went to a 3-day it's not so much a self-help or a mentor. It's more of like a life-changing experience where he gives you certainty that you can do anything in life. And all these people out there that are doing amazing things are just normal people at the end of the day, just have the sort of mindset. So that sort of gave me the confidence. And then I sort of just knew I could do it mentally. It's just physically, I was like, how's this going to cope? And then I got I emailed like 5 different run coaches, and all of them said, this was probably like a year after, maybe like 8-9 months after I started running, and all 5 of them said no. They're like, I think it's stupid. I think you'll be able to make it. They had no confidence. They're like, I wouldn't know how to train someone to do this. And I said, do you know anyone that will, like, and take me on? And one of them said, I know one guy, and he said, I think it's possible. And that's all I need to know, because I knew it was possible. I just needed someone else to believe it was possible as well, with the right tools to get me there.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating, isn't it? When you go out and do such big feats, the amount of people that sort of come out of the woodworks and tell you that it's not possible, and it just takes, even if it's just that one person that's going to support you, that kind of like, you're able to do something that most people think that is impossible.
Yeah, and I think it's because they can't picture themselves doing it, so they can't sort of picture someone else doing it as well. But it is a massive feat, but there's probably people who have done way more amazing, longer runs than I have. But yeah, just because they just see me as the ex-party boy, and then all of a sudden I'm going to run across Australia, they're like, that seems like the polar opposite. So I can understand where that comes from, but they didn't sort of have the mindset I had, where I was super confident. And there wasn't one time where I never thought I wouldn't make it, even the build up as well. Obviously I had a few things like injuries that scared me, but yeah, I always knew I could make it. I would have had to crawl or roll home. I would have made it somehow, but yeah.
Yeah, I think there's sometimes, unfortunately, like an element of judgment that people have, particularly if they hear that your history is like one of being a party boy or being arrested or whatever it is that's in your history. People don't believe that people can change. And I think it's so empowering to understand that you can, and to be able to sort of, prove to yourself, if not everyone, that is within you. So you obviously decide to do this. And actually, I'll say as a side note, I'm a Tony Robbins fan. And when you talk about certainty, it's like all I hear in my head is like, burn the boats. Yeah, exactly. Just like make that decision, cut it all off, be resourceful and get it done. So yeah, it's awesome to hear that you actually did that. So obviously in the lead up with logistics particularly, did this pan out to be something that was a lot harder to plan than you originally thought?
Yeah, especially from a guy that can't even book a doctor's appointment, let alone plan a run from Perth to Sydney, everything in between. There's so much going into it. Even like little things like organising sort of like a fundraiser to fund the run itself was a nightmare. And that was just for like a 1-day event where we sort of did like a charity boot camp. We had raffles and stuff, and all that sort of money went to obviously fund the run, was quite expensive. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff. I'd like to have my partner who's pretty good with all the monotonous, boring things. And also my boss, who's a good friend of mine, he said, I told him, he said, I'm not going to plan it for you. And I was like, damn it. He goes, I got a business to run, but he said, anything you need, I can help you get. So that were like 2 massive things, like even building websites, and it's all the small things you don't realize. But yeah, I sort of left everything probably to like the last couple of months realistically, and just was sort of rushing to get it through and got it all done. But yeah, we could have done it a lot worse, where there's 2 ways you can do this run. It's sort of like you just run and then have the support car drive in front and then just park off the road, or you can have a support car driving behind you, which was super hard to get approval from obviously Perth to Sydney and everything in between. So you have to go through local governments and obviously the state and get approval where you're going to be at what time. So it was a nightmare, but luckily we did it the other way because it was probably less boring for my partner to drive behind me at 10K an hour. So yeah, it was a nightmare, but we got there at the end. So
Yeah, I was actually laughing about that last night when I was looking more into what you did. And I was just, because your partner's name Olivia, is it?
Yep.
Yeah. And I was just like, I don't understand. Like, I feel like that would almost be just as hard to do what she did in driving that car every single day, like 10 kilometers in front of you and everything, and cooking you food. And, I heard you giggling, like massaging you and everything. And it's like, I'm very impressed with how you guys worked as a team. It was absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and that's what I always said as well. I always said it's definitely going to be worse driving it than running it. And then I started running it, probably got 5 days in. I went, okay, maybe it's probably not worse, but yeah, she just sacrificed 2.5 months of her life. Like she just started where I started. So we're both personal trainers, and I think she was there for probably 2 months. And then to be so fresh in the industry and then to have 2 months off, I sort of just said, you just got to learn as much as you can. You can come back a year or two ahead of everyone else that just goes straight into and tries to learn on the run. So, but yeah, she was studying, listening to audio books, a lot of self-development as well. So she made the most of the 2.5 months. But yeah, she did everything for me. And there's no way I could have done it by myself. There was no way anyone else that I would want there to support me, because I pretty much ran and went to the toilet by myself, and she literally did everything else. She cooked, massaged, drove, organised things, emailed people. So she was just as much as part of the run as I was. I was just running. She did all the hard stuff in between.
Yeah, I think it's so important to highlight support crews, because I feel like sometimes they don't get enough credit. And I think particularly when going into some things like this, like it is really intense for the person. I know I did something, I helped a girlfriend, she was doing a 24-hour run, and I stayed about 12 hours, like she was doing a lap run around a track, and I stayed about 12 hours kind of helping her with that, then came back in the morning. And I was absolutely exhausted. I was so surprised at how the level of like attention that you need to put on this one person who's running, and, check everything else that comes with that. Yeah, I feel like it's a very notable thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. And just to have sort of one person doing that, because I've read a lot of things and listened to a lot of like podcasts about people who've done like similar things in different sports, like a lot of like multi-day, even to like month endurance feats. And a lot of them have medics, physios, just crew running with them as well. So we just did it probably the most primitive you can do it, just us two in a small van, driving across Australia. And yeah, it would be super hard being so isolated. Like by the time I get back to the van I can't wait to get inside and sit down for 2 hours before I start running again. And she's been trapped in the thing for 8-9 hours out of the day. And you get outside the van and you're in the middle of nowhere. Like the road from Perth to Sydney is not much in between. All the nice locations are sort of 2 hours south or north. So it's just, you're pretty much sitting in the bush in a van and just trying to keep yourself sane all day.
Yeah, it's very admirable. So you guys drove across, obviously, to get to Perth. So on the first day of what is ahead of you, like what's going on in your mind?
So yeah, the first day was it was a real anticlimax. It took about 5 days to drive over, and you can sort of picture like how far. So I was aiming to do 60 Ks a day for 65 days. It ended up being a week longer because I had a lot of injuries the first 2 weeks. But you can sort of like you picture, I know how far 60 Ks is, then you times that by 65, you can sort of roughly gauge how far you think it is. And when it takes 5 days to drive over and you go on 130 Ks for 7-8 hours out of the day, you don't actually realize how far it is. And you're sort of seeing, I guess, the terrain you're going to be running back. And everyone sort of scared me on the way over. Like, it's going to be real scary. Like there's road trains and there's sketchy people out there. But we didn't have one bad thing happen to us. So yeah, we got to Perth the day before, and I left the 1st of April, and I just got out of the van, we're at a caravan park, and I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll see you soon, and then started running. But it was sort of super cool. Like it took about 10 Ks to get out of Perth, and then the next 20 Ks was just this steep incline. And I was just pretty much like just trying to run up it because I was still super excited. And I guess the novelty worn off after the first 15 Ks of uphill. But yeah, so just knowing that I had to do this every day for the next, what I thought was going to be 64 days, I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to go one day at a time. But it's very hard to think like that when you're running, and you sort of enjoy the adventure, but you're sort of craving to finish as well, because you sort of build up for 2 years and thinking about it every day, that you sort of want to just get it done. Obviously, as the days went on and my body started breaking down in the first 2 weeks, I was like, I just want to be home already. So
Yeah, I'm interested in that novelty aspect because I feel like, particularly in something like creating awareness for mental health, you're obviously getting a lot of eyes on you, which kind of like I feel like really like builds up the energy inside of you to get excited about such a feat. But then when you sort of like get down into the nitty gritty and start actually like running 60 Ks a day and you're starting to have injuries, is there like any like disempowering thoughts that you experience where you're just like, oh man, what am I doing out here? Who do I think I am? Like, did any of those thoughts come and visit you during that time?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was more, obviously I was raising awareness as well, which is the most important thing. And obviously the money was just like, it's not as important. It's more the awareness I was trying to raise as well. But we ended up raising like $63,000, but that was towards the end of the run. So I got sort of halfway and I think I raised about 25,000, which is, I'm super grateful for, don't get me wrong, but it ended up, I think the run nearly cost 25,000. So I was like, I've ran nearly halfway across Australia and I've only raised what the run cost. I might as well have just stayed home and did nothing. But yeah, that sort of played on me mentally because your emotions are all over the place. You go through 10 different emotions in 10 minutes. Like you're happy, then you're sad, and you have hope, and you're like, this is so hard. And you're just so drained all the time that, yeah, it was super hard to stay positive the whole time, and especially raising awareness for mental health. And obviously, you want to create like a good, I guess, vibe the whole way and show that it does get tough, but you can push through. But yeah, it was sort of hard sometimes staying positive, especially, yeah, made it halfway. And I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Surely running halfway across Australia is worth more than 25,000, but yeah, it sort of really came together towards the end. So I was super grateful that I raised anything, let alone nearly 65,000. So
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So when you were out there, like having those thoughts, what were you pulling on to kind of like get back into that positive headspace?
just knowing that my whole thing behind it was people are suffering depression, anxiety, 24/7, 365. I put myself in this suffering, so hypothetically they don't have to, in a way. So, and I've suffered depression from before. I know how hard it is, and you do anything to get out of that mindset. So to be physically and mentally fit and just doing something that's super hard, you put yourself there. That was sort of what kept me going, is just thinking of all the people that are suffering that may end up losing hope in this run. Obviously, the further I get, the more attention it's going to get, the more lives potentially could be saved. So if I made it halfway and then quit and only raised 25,000, it probably wouldn't be on this podcast speaking to you, who probably touch a lot of people, and all the other podcasts and all the speaking opportunities I've had as well. So I'm super grateful for opportunities like these to spread the message and awareness as well. So
Yeah, it's so important to get clear on that why. And obviously you have to in doing such a big event. But I think, even on smaller running events, certainly that I've experienced, I've almost had to pre-plan like 3 whys, because I feel like you kind of pull on the first why when you're doing it tough. And then kind of like that why doesn't like seem enough anymore. And you kind of throw it over the shoulder and you're like, all right, what else have I got that's going to keep me in this event? So it's pretty awesome to do something where, obviously in creating awareness, it is saving lives. Like that's definitely going to keep getting you to put one foot in front of the other.
yeah, exactly. And no one's running from Perth to Sydney for fun, I can guarantee you. Because you get 2 weeks in, you go, what am I doing out here? I'm just going to throw it all in. So you have to have a good reason why. So like anything in life, you're going to want to do something extraordinary, like say start a business. You got to have a reason why you want to start the business. It's I'm going to start a business because it sounds fun. You have a reason why, what your service is, I guess, what you're trying to achieve in that business as well, or like anything in life.
Yeah. So I read that your favorite part, or at least one of your favorite parts of the run, was meeting a dog that I assume you called Sparkles. Tell us a bit about that story.
Yeah, so I was in the middle of, I think we just hit Victoria. So we're in Victoria for 2 days and we just got in there, and there was, so Olivia pulled in and sort of stopped in a sort of a pullover bay. There's heaps of like weird, just sort of like dirt pullover bays in the middle of nowhere pretty much. And she ended up filming a dog, and I was sort of watching it on Instagram. And then I finally caught up to her, and then I was like, where'd the dog go? She's like, oh, it ran off into a paddock. So I kept running for a little bit, and then I found a dog and I yelled out to it and it started following me. So I ran like 10 Ks together. It was the first time that, obviously I have 2 dogs at home, so I've missed my dogs massively. But it was the first time that anything or anyone has ran with me. So I sort of grabbed onto it and had a good old afternoon. It really, really uplifted my mood as well. It was like a little bit of a tough that day. I was sort of struggling a little bit, and just to run, I guess, and something exciting, obviously being out there for so long, and there's really not much in between. Like you have a few exciting things here and there, or you see something cool, but that sort of wears off after a while. So yeah, we found a dog and end up keeping it for till I finished that day. So probably like for 3 or 4 hours. And then we just drove back and just found the closest farm, which was probably like nearly 5K away from where I found Sparkles, and took it back, and was super sad. I thought it was gonna be like a love story where we drive across Australia, find a dog, and then it runs the last bit through New South Wales and Victoria with me. Then we can't find an owner and keep it, but unfortunately it had an owner. So
there are actually a few of those stories. I know something similar happened with an adventure racing team. They had like a dog come out of nowhere and like I think followed them to the end. And I think the guy like ended up, he was from Germany or something, like flying the dog back to his home and keeping it. So you can live vicariously through them.
Yeah. I honestly thought it was going to happen. I was like, this is one of those stories, like it's going to happen to us. And then we drove it to the house and he's like, oh, Ben, he gets out all the time. And I was like, oh, it's super dangerous. Right on the highway as well. So yeah, unfortunately, we didn't
not to be.
Yeah.
So when going through your posts, your social media posts, I started to see a little pattern. I'm not sure if you noticed that a lot of your posts said, you know, back when life was more simple or simpler, and it was referring to sort of back when you were doing the run. What is it about life being simple that pulls you?
I sort of like it was a simple but hard life. Obviously the run, coming back to work and having a routine, and you have a lot of people leaning on you, which I love as well. Don't get me wrong. Being a personal trainer, you have like, you sort of like, you're in a way, you're more of a counselor and obviously give them good advice through nutrition and obviously training as well. But yeah, I felt like I lost my purpose in a way. So that was a build up for two. It didn't consume my life, the run, but it was a massive part of my life. And I love the process of the long runs and the hard physical feats as well. And then to come back and everything was just chaotic, and obviously what's going on with COVID and all that kind of stuff. It just seemed like that getting up and running for 3 or 4 hours in the morning and then going, having lunch, having a sleep, and then running for 3 hours was the good life. And you sort of do. I do miss being out there, but also love being home as well. But yeah, it's till next time.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, isn't it? Like, you know, as you were saying, when you're out there, you're like, oh, like 2 weeks in, you're like, can't wait for this to be done. And then you get home and you're like, oh, can't wait to run again.
Literally, that's what happened. Like, I honestly never thought that I would get home and be like, I wish I could still be out there. But obviously, it was super hard at the time, but it was an adventure. And it's sort of, you're traveling in Australia and you're seeing it from a different point of view, which is no one has probably seen it. And from the very slow circumstance of just running, you're not going too fast. When you drive, you sort of miss stuff. When you're running, you see everything and you're sort of looking around. So it was super cool experience.
Yeah, I think it's just being out in the elements, isn't it? It's sort of, you know, watching the sunrise and the sunsets and seeing different kinds of animals and sort of being in that more peaceful state. Like, as you said, it was so isolating out there, and just to kind of like get back in touch with nature, I think is like a very good healing medicine for things like anxiety and depression as well.
Yeah, definitely. And so it sounds sort of weird saying this because I was thinking in my head, I've told a few people, but you sort of feel like you're becoming more, I guess, in touch with Mother Earth. Like my vision from when I started to when I finished, like I could see kangaroos from like 3, 4K away, or see something move. It's sort of like, I don't know if that goes back to, I guess, the days where we're sort of like hunting and gathering. And it felt like, because I was obviously doing these long runs and I was eating not as much as I should have been, that I was sort of, my body might have been like, he's starving, he's hunting for food. And then just your vision and your sense and your hearing, like everything sort of, just got super weird. And I was like, this is so random. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever experienced this before. It's just me, but yeah, it felt like I could have lived out there off the land.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I definitely agree. I did a run out in Alice Springs and felt very similar. And it's also like interesting, even with like coming across Sparkles, it's like you have that element of like, yeah, like stay in our tribe. It like becomes very primal in your thoughts, doesn't it? Yeah, it's very definitely interesting. So when on your last day, I saw pictures of you coming into, I think it was Wanda, and there were just so many people cheering you on, running with you. Can you share a little bit about the final day?
Yeah, the final day. So we started at Waterfall, which was about 26 kilometers away. So I sort of planned it where I would come back in on the Saturday. So that's when I had the 65 days plan that I'd come back on a Saturday. Then obviously I fell a little bit too far behind to catch up. So I thought, might as well just make these days more enjoyable and then put it on the next week. Otherwise, if I kept going the way I was going, I would have come back on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday when everyone's at work. And I sort of wanted to share the experience, obviously, with everyone who was supporting me along the way, getting sponsors down there as well. So make it like a big day. Yeah, it was a 26 kilometer day, and we had about probably 13 at the start. And it was super cool to see everyone. It was sort of weird having conversations. Obviously, me and Olivia had conversations the whole time, and you'd sort of have conversation with, like, say, people that you meet for like 10 minutes max. But then speaking to people you've actually realizing was super. Yeah, it was a bit different, a bit odd to start. But yeah, we started running, and then probably the whole way, we sort of had it planned, like roughly how long we'd take it. Certain spots would meet up. And by the end of it, running into Cronulla, we had probably like nearly 100 people run. It was absolute chaos. And everyone was clapping and cheering. And I was super embarrassed. Like, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if to like start clapping as well and acting like it wasn't me that was running. And people taking photos. And yeah, the gym just fully organized a massive day. Like, they had like shops down there, like little coffee cart and all different kinds of things, and just run into sort of like a channel of people I didn't even know as well, that just been following along or heard about it and just come down and support. Was super cool, because obviously speaking at the end as well about the awareness we tried to raise as well, is hopefully they can go back and try and continue to raise awareness and have more of an understanding of, I guess, about mental health and how important it is as well. So yeah, running in was super surreal. Obviously picture that day every day for the last 2 years. And then obviously when I was on the run, it probably consumed about 99% of my thoughts about finishing. So yeah, it was bigger, a lot bigger than I thought. I've been happy to run into close friends and family, but it was sort of like a festival down there. So
Yeah, it's very beautiful. And in sort of obviously on the other side, with these sorts of things, it's such an incredible journey, but obviously, as you sort of just shared just then, you're being pulled by finishing and seeing friends and family and achieving this big goal. And that's absolutely incredible. But then you kind of wake up the next day and that's behind you. And I read somewhere that you were talking about there's almost an element of feeling slightly lost post this experience. What's sort of happening with that?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I think the next day I woke up at 4 a.m. and I was just walking the house for 2 hours, rearranging things. I didn't know what to do. Obviously, your body gets so primed into running like 50 plus Ks a day that when you wake up the next day and you don't have to run, all it feel like doing is running. Because that was sort of like not my purpose, but that sort of was like a massive part of my life. And I really enjoyed the build up as well. So like the journey was great, but it was also the training building up in between as well, just pushing myself where I never thought I could be. Like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I was depressed and I was taking drugs and every weekend, that I never thought I could be running across Australia. So yeah, it just goes to show that if you have the right mindset and I guess the right tools and the people in your corner, that you can do anything. So yeah, it was super surreal finishing. It was great and it was everything I expected and more. And I was happy the next day, but then I sort of was like, now what? Like, what do I do now? And I sort of had the same feeling when I stopped partying as well, because you build all those, I guess, a lot of friendships and you meet a lot of people through, I guess, partying, and you, whether they're real or fake friendships at the time, you'd never really know. But yeah, sort of, and then you had, that's your identity in a way. Like mine was a party boy. Then I sort of took that away, and it was super hard to sort of let go of, because you're always known as the fun, outgoing guy that was always partying and everyone loved it. And then all of a sudden, then you start running, and then you become the runner, and then you finish. You're like, what am I now? Like, I could go back to working at the gym and just living a pretty simple life doing that, but it's I sort of want more. Like, what else can I do? So I sort of want to see how far I can obviously take the training and do different types of exercise as well, change up the modalities. Like being a beginner in the training, like 4 years ago, I started running nearly to this day, and I had injuries all the way through. So probably like 3 serious years of running, and I could run across Australia. So what's to say in another 3 years, if I change to a different sport, then what can I do then? So
yeah, absolutely. So with mental health, and obviously, as you said, you started running 4 years ago, almost to the day. What have been your most impactful lessons on your own life in terms of mental health since experiencing, quote unquote, what you say, undiagnosed depression, like you weren't even sort of aware that what I'm gathering from that, you weren't even sort of aware that you were depressed. You were kind of just living life and not feeling great, to up until now, obviously you're a very self-aware person. You're trying to create more awareness. For people on this podcast that may be listening that have potentially anxiety or depression or just aren't feeling great, what are some things that have really helped you sort of since, Troy, 4 years ago up until this point?
Just having a goal, something to work towards as well, something you love doing. Like obviously I started and I hated running, but I sort of loved doing it. So that gave me a purpose and drive to get up every morning. Obviously the physical exercise is another great tool as well to sort of combine the goal into one. Just getting out and moving your body. I guess if you're sitting inside all day and you're not moving your body and you're eating shit food, then you're obviously going to feel a lot worse than you could. So yeah, definitely eating well, and you get more confident as well. I've had a lot of clients come in and they maybe a little bit overweight, or they maybe a bit immobile and they can't move properly, and then they may be eating shit food as well. And you change up their diet a little bit and then get them moving. They start to lose a few kilos here. They gain confidence, and they're making better decisions throughout their life as well, because they're more confident, more, I guess, aware of what you can do as well, and you just make better decisions, and then you have overall better life. So there's not one thing that's going to work for everyone. So mine was obviously a massive goal and they're working towards that, but someone's might be starting a business, or they might hate their job. It might just be as simple as quitting their job and doing something that they love. I sort of feel like there's 4 pillars of happiness. You got your friends and family, you got your health, and then you've got your career, and then your relationships. Your relationship could be with yourself or with someone else, your friends and family, and your career, and then your health. So if one of those is sort of out, then it's going to bleed into the other ones. If you're a bit unhealthy, you're eating shit, you're maybe overweight, then that's going to bleed into all areas of life. So you sort of got to get them all to one even playing field. And obviously if you're lacking in one, then try and build that up, because it's going to bleed into all other areas of life as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think just understanding that, these things are habits. And at the start, it's probably going to feel a lot more uncomfortable than what it will. And particularly in your experience, I mean, firsthand, we can see you could hardly sort of run 11 kilometers without feeling immense pain. And then all of a sudden you're waking up at 4 a.m. thinking, I want to run 50 to 60 Ks. So it's just about the practice. But at first it's about getting clear on what you want to do. And I think that sense of purpose and that direction and having a goal that pulls you is so important when it comes to mental health, because you wake up every day and you've got things to do. I think it's when you start to feel like every day seems monotonous and lacks meaning, that's when you sort of start filtering into these other aspects of life that may not be good for you.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the same thing. Like, it's sort of like mental health and the Run Across Australia, the same thing. Like, same thing with depression is you just got to show up every day, put one foot in front of the other. So just keep showing up and get it done.
Yeah, and I definitely think, as you've certainly emphasized, is just surrounding yourself with the right people. And I certainly know within the running community, I've met some of my best friends through running and long distance running, and everyone is just so incredibly supportive. And it's actually quite fascinating how many people have stories of turning points in their life when they were addicted or, were partiers or whatever it is. And then they sort of turn to running as this more empowering outlet. And, at the start, maybe it is kind of just like finding that outlet, but still having the negative thoughts. But I think as you're sort of experiencing, and I certainly have throughout the journey, when you're running, you're moving through stuff, you're processing stuff. So it's not just kind of an outlet, it starts to become something that you're progressing in and becoming more through.
Yeah, definitely. It's sort of like a therapy in a way. Like, you sort of process your emotions as you run, and the further you run, the more you push yourself and the more, I guess, you realize you can do.
Yeah, I agree. And with running, like, I'd say get off the treadmill and get outside in nature and breathe deep breaths and, see different animals and maybe go running with some friends. I think that certainly helps as well. Because I think, going to the gym, obviously with certain aspects of strength training and things like that, I personally think is very important. But I think also, even if it's just on the weekend, get out and take a few deep breaths. And I think that is very, it doesn't have as much emphasis on it as that it should in terms of mental health as well.
Yeah, and getting outside, like we have, especially in our area, it's beautiful around here, like national parks or Kurnell or down Cronulla. There's so much nice scenery as well.
So on one final note, I would love to ask you, Troy, what does it mean to you to be human?
What it means to me is contribution. So helping people become the best they can be, and that'll ultimately help you become the best you can be as well. So I think Tony Robbins says the secret of living is giving. So whether it's giving a great service or inspiring people, giving people hope, that's definitely what I want to do, is just keep doing things like this and give people hope and inspire them to become the best they can be.